V-wheels that are wearing down, parts that just aren't articulating in the same print, and a Prusa Mark IV that's maybe, kind of, having some issues. All this and more, PrintFixFriday, episode 118. Where'd all of my hair go? Let's get into this. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to a post Sanjay Mortimer Rep Rap Fest me. We're going to talk a little bit more about what happened to my hair toward the end of the video, so stay tuned if that's something that you guys want to see. But if you are dealing with issues with 3D printing, you can reach out to us directly via the links on the screen, or you can email us directly, youtube@3dmusketeers.com, so we can help you get back to printing with purpose. We got some interesting fails for you guys today. We're going to take a look at how to solve them, and a couple of them might have some extra questions attached onto it, so enjoy. It's great to be back and great to remind you to leave a like and get subscribed if you haven't. But hey, let's just jump into getting these things fixed. Design flaw on the Neptune 4 Max. Does anyone else have this issue where the print head rollers grind on the fan? So we've got a Neptune 4 Max here with some V wheels that they're not looking great, but I don't see them grinding on any fans. What we can see here is that the actual fastener, the screw for the V-wheel, is contacting the frame of the printer. And well, that's because V-wheels are made of like a Delrid material, POM technically, but I don't want to get too far into it. When they wear down and they're not properly replaced on a regularly scheduled maintenance, you're going to lose diameter. When you lose enough diameter, things will start to contact other things. We've talked about this previously in a video where we talked about the V-wheels. You want them to be tight, but not too tight, but also not too loose. It's more of a feeling thing. Most likely here, there was way too much tension on this V-wheel, and it has slowly just kind of disintegrated over time. The only course of action here is to replace that V-wheel and check to make sure that everything works properly. The other thing that you can look for, if you wanted to, you could theoretically flip that entire bolt around. I don't think it's necessary. I think the newer V-wheel, when it is properly tensioned, shouldn't grind into anything, but you could theoretically flip it around. I don't have a Neptune 4 Max, so I'm not certain if that is the right way or if it's not the right way. But I can tell you, if you put a new wheel on it, you tension it properly, and it is still digging into the frame, flipping it around should actually solve most of that problem for you. Just something to know. But it's one of the reasons I don't like V-wheels. They tend to wear down way faster than your standard ball bearing motion system, or now that we're seeing these in the industry, the carbon, bronze, brass bushings that you see on machines like the Bamboo Lab X1 Carbon, P1P, and P1S. Those style, while they are a bushing on a carbon rod of sorts, they will wear down over time, but because there's not really anything that you can adjust, they should viably last longer because the human factor of, oh, I can over tighten things, pretty much goes away. Mind you, those are much harder to service than these V wheels are, so something to note there. Oh, what a good cat. Calibrate E-steps on the Mark IV. I was doing some tests and found that the E-steps for the extruder was inaccurate for my printer. Asking it to extrude 100 millimeters of filament resulted in only 94 millimeters being extruded. Since I assembled mine from a kit, I figured there may be some of the factory tuned settings that would not exactly be what I needed. So I did the calculations to find the new E-steps, and it extruded exactly 100 millimeters when requested. However, when I tried to save that value with M500 and Power Cycle, the printer went back to the old settings. Am I doing something wrong? Or is this intentional? Do I really have to set my calibrated E-steps in G-code for every print? And after some Googling, they found the experimental menu in the firmware, which is where you would go through and actually change these things if you wanted to. But while the article is for the Mini, it exists for the Mark IV firmware too, because they're pretty much based upon the same thing. Knowingly, the menu doesn't give you decimal places, just whole numbers, so it's not exact. Something to note, this I'm fairly certain is deliberate. If you look in the G-code for your machine, now I don't know how this works on the Mark IV, but it is like this for the Mark III, in the variants of the Mark III. It actually sets your extrusion multiplier to 95%. This is as designed. I don't know if it is doing this to deal with an over extrusion issue or something like that, but if we take a look at Prusa Slicer, we can see that the extrusion multiplier is actually, at least for the Mark III, set like this. We look right here, M221. If the layer height is less than 0.075 millimeters, 100, else 95. So no matter what you set your extrusion multiplier to, in your G code, in that start code, it is going to set it to 95%, or in your case, 94. If your printer is printing properly, even if your extrusion multiplier isn't perfectly at 100%, is it worth fixing? Because changing the extrusion multiplier will now adjust everything else on the machine that will likely send you down a path of kind of going through and messing with settings. It's what we found, at least for the Prusas. We're not exactly certain why they do it, and I probably could have asked, but I didn't, because it didn't come to mind at the time. But, you know, anyone from Prusa is watching this video, or you know the answer, let me know in those comments. I'm sure there's an answer for it, but it's not one that I've ever understood. But the printer works perfectly fine. It makes very accurate parts. I'm not going to bother. There is actually an experimental menu where you can go ahead and enable the ability to set those functions. Now, with that being said, it's actually not that difficult to just add it in. It's an M221 command. So if you did want to add it in, it's a pretty easy thing for you to do here inside of your G code. And then all you have to do is save a custom profile, which is not difficult either. We have quite a few of them. Then just go ahead and use that when you run the printer. But I would caution it. I'm not saying that Prusa is perfect. They're not. Prusa's had plenty of mistakes throughout the years, and certainly the Mark IV is not the end-all be-all perfect 3D printer out there. It's a good printer. While I don't have one at this moment, we are looking to get one here relatively soon, so stay tuned if that's the thing that you are looking for. But especially when you assemble them yourself, there are elements of this is not 100% perfect that can certainly become a problem. When looking at the extrusion multiplier though, I've always thought it was weird, but I've never bothered to change it because it just works. Love to know your thoughts. Do you think it's good to go through and actually change everything to make it exactly right? Or if it works, don't bother. Let me know. Starting to dislike my K1 Max. Both printed at the same time, but as separate objects on the bed. Only difference is one being at the front of the bed, one at the back. Both are at their maximum articulation. So the K1 Max is a 3D printer from Creality. Let's not beat around the bush. It's a Bamboo clone. It's Creality's Bamboo clone, where they're trying to get some market share on the high-speed Core XY out-of-the-box 3D printer market. As Creality does, they're not the first ones to the fence with this one, but they're certainly pushing the price down, and, well, Bamboo is following, so I'm here for it. We don't have a K1 or a K1 Max. We were talking to get a K1, but I really would prefer to have the K1 Max. I don't believe that most people are going to take the smaller build volume of the K1, where they would much prefer the K1 Max. With that being said, though, this is a bed leveling issue. And unfortunately, if the machine is fully automated, there isn't much that you can do about it. It's just the way it's going to be. You can look at adjusting, maybe there are some knobs or things that you can work on the K1, but if you are experiencing this problem, it is consistent, you might want to look at physically adjusting that bed and seeing if there's something that you can do about it. You also want to check to make sure that your build plate itself is properly held down. If it's not properly held down, it will create a problem. And at least on the Bamboos, if it's not properly aligned, it can bow on the sides, and that bowing can be a bit of a problem. And it does look like that there is some ability to manually adjust the K1 Max's bed, so that's good. But I do have to agree with some of the commenters that the lines are a little bit crazy on these. It is white filament, so we're likely just seeing some shadowing here, but definitely it might be time to re-level it. The user said that they did spend about an hour to manually level the bed, which doesn't seem right. These shouldn't take that long to do it. And if you are struggling with manually leveling the bed, we did cover manual bed leveling in a previous video. We'll card to it so you guys can take a look. And we might be revisiting that and trying to compare it directly to a printer with auto leveling and see, well, who wins? If you guys want to see that, let me know in those comments. This fail comes from Discord member, the Nocturnist. Remember, if you guys do want to support the efforts that we do here and want to come hang out with us on our private Discord server, you can join at the $10 tier or higher. Links are in that description down below via YouTube, PayPal, or Patreon coming soon to Thangs and Printables. I should have those up already, and I don't. Just gonna add that to the docket. Anyways, he was having some issues with filament getting jammed over and over and over. No matter what he did, it was just getting jammed.
You just got jammed.
He thought, maybe it's heat creep, maybe it's a clogged nozzle. Then he pulls the filament out to inspect, and lo and behold, that's a hell of a bubble. We have not seen filament like this in a long time, like in nigh on a decade. Filament has gotten so good that even the cheap stuff is pretty darn good. But it's why we talk about buying from reputable manufacturers, and while you will pay more money than buying from the cheapest game in town, you get some form of reliability and trustworthiness that you just don't get with other, more affordable brands. Now, this could be a freak accident, but recently when we toured Printed Solid and we made our own filament, we made Jesse's Elixir. We'll card to that video so you guys can take a look. It's a long video, but if you want to know exactly how many barks it takes to make Jesse's Elixir, you'll enjoy that video. This is not possible from Printed Solid. They have a metal tube, and that metal tube is a specific diameter, and it will not let anything that is above that diameter go through. In fact, it will cause a crash on the line, and then the accumulator goes and does its thing while you quickly put in a new straw, cut the line, and refeed it. But literally, it's not possible. So this is a company that's manufacturing filament with quite loose tolerances and, well, at least not having any backup whatsoever. And while, yes, mistakes can get through, these ones are not mistakes that you often check for, because why would you ever expect your filament to have a bulge so large we should probably be blurring it? It's a weird one. And I will tell you, a messed up filament like this would not have been my first guess. And I certainly wouldn't blame anyone if they got really frustrated when they found this. I would be cutting this filament and putting it somewhere so that I could remember how dumb some fails can actually be. We used to make our own filament. We still have a Filastruder. We used to make our own filament back when it made sense financially to do it. And while our diameters were not great, they were way better than this. We've seen some other content creators doing their own filament using their waste material. It's something that we used to do. It's not my favorite thing in the world because it is just a nightmare. It takes forever. It's noisy, but it is nice if you're looking for a way to recycle some of the waste material that you have, and your local municipal recycling centers just don't accept 3D prints. So something to keep in mind there. It might be worth revisiting it the same way that other creators have, because it might be cool to see, does it still make sense all these years down the line, especially with how affordable filament has gotten throughout the years. But yeah, this one's a bit of a bummer, and I would tell you, how the company reacts to dealing with this problem would be my decision of whether or not I choose to continue using them. With that being said, I probably would not continue to use a company that sends filament like this. That means they definitely are not checking their diameters, and they definitely don't have any measures in place to keep issues like this from getting past. The spool up here, maybe stick with that. That's a Prus-Inaccurate spool. And while Prus-Inaccurate is very expensive, it is some of the highest toleranced filament on the planet at the moment. And, well, they're not afraid to prove it, since they have a QR code that will show you every bit about your filament's ovality, its diameter, and everything like that throughout the process, which is, it's objectively pretty darn cool. Neptune 3 Plus. My 3D printer randomly drilled a hole into the board while in the beginning section. Can I still print on it, or what do I do? Well, the reason it did that is it was likely trying to home itself or do some sort of Z offset or bed leveling, and your plate wasn't there, so it squished right through the magnet. As long as there isn't a hump on, you know, the edges of that divot, it's not that big of a deal. If there is a hump, try to flatten it back out. You can use like a flat piece of metal and just try to scrape it, or you can use a X-Acto knife to try to slice it, or you can just kind of use your fingers to squish it down. It's fine. As long as your flex plate that goes on top of that is still in good shape, you'll be all right. But what you don't want is to have a hump now in the flex plate where, since, you know, the material has to go somewhere where the squished magnet is raised, you don't want that to be a bump in your build plate as well. So as long as you clean that off and make it nice and smooth, you'll be perfectly fine, and there is nothing to worry about there. This is not the first time we've seen this happen, and it certainly is not going to be the last. If you are going to work on your printers at all, and you're going to be doing homing or bed leveling or anything like that, make sure that your build plate is on the machine, or it can cause pretty bad damage. With that being said, this is not the worst we've seen. The thing that sucks about damaging the magnet on printers like this is that replacing the magnet is an absolute pain in the keister, and often it is just easier to replace the entire heat bed than it is to try to peel that sticky back magnet off. This one, though, it's not going to cause any lasting damage as long as the heat bed is okay and you clean off the hump that will be left over. You'll be perfectly fine. A submission from Omaha 3D Prints on our Patreon Discord server. He's running the input shaping firmware on his Prusa Mini and is having issues with the perimeters not sticking together. Looking at their print settings, they're running 220C on the hot end, and pretty much everything is the same. The thing to remember when you're running fast speeds is that you do also often need to increase your temperatures. 220 might not be enough. But the other thing that we found interesting is that his perimeter overlap was at 15%. We like to run 20 to 25% perimeter overlap. So if you are dealing with your perimeters separating from each other, add a little more overlap and it should keep them together. But when you're running these fast speeds, you also need to make sure that you increase your temperatures accordingly so that your material just isn't cooling too fast and causing issues where it is shrinking and pulling away from the other perimeters. So extra heat, extra overlap, and life should be pretty good. As printers get faster, these are issues that we are going to see over and over again. And it's probably a good idea for us to do a video on it, so I will add that to the queue for video ideas that we have for 2024. If you are running a fast printer or you're making your printer faster, you also need to remember to raise your temperatures accordingly, because if you don't, you're going to end up with issues like this. We see it more common instead of the perimeters not sticking to each other, it's the infill pulling away from the perimeters themselves. If you notice that, just start increasing the temperature while you're printing. Hopefully, it's not going to cause enough damage that you have to restart the print, but it'll at least give you the ability to test live by turning up temperatures, changing speeds, changing cooling factors, so that when you do go to run the next print, you'll at least be running with a little bit more purpose. Last but not least, if it wasn't immediately obvious to everybody, I don't have my long hair anymore. Almost 2 weeks ago, on the 2nd of December, 2023, after over 3 years of not having a haircut, we shaved my head live at the Sanjay Mortimer Rep Fest and raised over $6,000 US doing it. So thank you to everybody, even if you donated $1 or you were like the G's that are the freaking Voron team and dropped $1,200 US to have Max himself shave a Voron logo in the back of my head. I have recently got my hair cleaned up, so it does not look like I have weird bald spots all over my head. You guys are awesome. Thank you to Joe Prusa for dropping €1,000 as well. We had RC Maniac with 500. We had a lot of great people that threw a lot of money toward a great cause. And I want to thank every single one of you for watching, for dealing with our audio issues. Don't worry, we filmed the entire thing in 4K, and it looked like some of my friends were filming as well. So I'll be very curious to see what happens with their videos. But we'll be releasing that entire video coming soon, so stay tuned, because it is a little bit odd to not have a lot of hair anymore. And thankfully, my barber still remembers me and took good care of your boy over here. So I'm glad that we were able to do a good thing. So thank you to all of you that have kind of stuck with us for as long as we have. Some of you that knew the story of my hair, and those that didn't, well, now you do. And a huge thank you goes out to Sanjay's sister, who was the one that sectioned my hair so we could donate the hair to the Little Princess Trust, and then actually did the bulk of the shaving. Also, big props to David Lamb of E3D, who did the open source logo on this side, Jacob Lord of Construct 3D, who did the Hermera logo on this side, and of course, Max from the Voron team, who did the Voron logo on the back of my head. You guys are truly what embodies the idea of making awesome. Smurf was awesome. We had a little bit of time before Smurf, a little bit of time after Smurf over in the UK and the EU. Videos on that are going to be coming out sporadically, so stay tuned for those, because that kind of stuff is coming. And there is tons, I mean, literally days of content that will never make it to public YouTube. So if you want to see things like us walking around Paris and walking around Prague and going to museums and things like that, make sure to subscribe to our Patreon, YouTube channel members, PayPal, whatever you want. Kick a couple of bucks into that creator fund, because those videos will be released there relatively soon, so stay tuned for that kind of thing. But I do want to thank everybody for this. It's been a crazy journey for my hair, and now I'm rocking a sick fade. Anyways, guys, that's all we got for you on this 118th episode of Print Fix Friday. Stay safe out there. Don't forget to call your loved ones. A massive thank you goes out to all of our channel supporters, and as always, keep making awesome. Don't forget to leave a like and get subscribed. See you later. Mind you, those are much harder to service than these VOEs